Something that caught our attention, speaking of Donald Trump, he was at Mar-a-Lago. Can we show the picture, show the tweet? Just the other day, put out by one Elise Stefanik, the congresswoman at Mar-a-Lago, standing there alongside Donald Trump. You can see what she says there. Great meeting at Mar-a-Lago with my friend. The stakes could not be higher. Patriots will continue to unite behind the president's campaign to save America. It's on the line. Let's do this. We were talking during the break. We're not sure of anyone's star who has risen more in Republican circles than hers in the last, I don't know, call it last month or so, because of the anti-Semitism hearing and her direct questioning at the university presidents. You think there's something to that picture there?
Of course there is. I think she has been looking for an audience.
So what is to that picture there?
Well, I think one, Stefanik is clearly, whether it's the speakership, courting to be right next to the speaker, or Trump wants to be in a position to be in power, maybe the VP candidate. I wonder, though, Blake, if she chided Trump for his comments of both sides, good people on both sides in Charlottesville, given her newfound track on anti-Semitism.
Well, first of all, her star went up very fast when she was a part of the impeachment hearing. I mean, that was the first time that the grassroots effort that support Trump really started backing her. But I also think she was down there for a fundraiser, not necessarily that he was supporting, but so she was there. And many people do that, as you know, Mick. I mean, and these pictures are posted all the time, but I do think she's one of the shortlisters probably for the VP. Not that I have any inside knowledge.
Nick knows her more better than I do, but I'll say watching her, Democrats really, really liked her initially. And then when you're right, when the first impeachment came about, she became a fierce defender of the president to the way that shocked a lot of Democrats. Were like, who is this person? And I think now that she's got the full support of her conference, she's coming back around and starting to make some mainstream appeal here. So, that picture should cause a lot of people to talk about.
What are you hearing, Mick?
Her star is definitely going up in large part because of the hearing a couple weeks back with the college presidents. Over 1 billion people saw those online videos. You can't even contemplate.
And she
what
affected things.
And she did. She moved the needle. She did something. But the other thing I'm hearing out of Trump world is very interesting, and it caught my attention because it has that ring of some clarity to it, which is the name that I'm hearing now being added to the list. It's not like it's the top of the list, but it's on the list. We've talked about the regular cast of characters: Kristi Noem, Kim Reynolds, although she's now endorsed DeSantis,
For possible vice
presidents. Now Elise Stefanik, Ben Carson. Ben Carson, because he fits a new characteristic, which is Trump might be looking for someone who doesn't want to immediately start running for president. He doesn't want a VP. Again, he gets elected. He's term limited. So immediately the discussion starts turning to who's coming next. Trump might not want somebody in that #2 spot who's immediately campaigning to be the next president.
And you point out that it was sort of a similar thinking with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. But I would think that there's a fairly long list that would fit that category, right? That could go into, not long, but I would think several names. So why Ben Carson?
Ben's already on the inside. He was in the cabinet last time. He stayed very close to the president. He's doing some really good think tank work. He's supporting the president's policies and so forth. So he's still in that. He's not in the inner circle. He's not there in Mar-a-Lago working every single weekend. He's not in the campaign, for example, but Trump knows him. They have a relationship. So again, he's got to be, if I had a list of top 5, he'd be on it right now.
And people like him.
Yeah, I think the president and President Trump in the first time he ran chose Mike Pence to bring some experience that he didn't have with the government to the table, and that backfired on him. I believe he thinks it did. So I think this time he's going to look for one factor, and that's loyalty. To your point, he's not going to outshine the president. He's going to be a loyal vice president. Trump has the experience that I think, there's no question about his experience because he's a former president. So I think, Ben Carson meets that criteria.
What would be what is more important to Trump? Is it that
winning?
No. But to win, is it somebody who's not going to be sort of a 4-year or not going to be running for president the second they get in the door, or is it someone who fits another sort of criteria?
It depends, and you're going to make that decision when you get probably down to the convention, right? If he feels like he's at the convention and he needs to have a woman on the ticket in order to do X, Y, Z, that goes one way. If he doesn't feel like he needs any help at all, and he's actually thinking about, who's going to make a better person inside the building? I remember what Mike Pence was like. I don't want that. I want something else. Maybe it's an entirely different list. So it's too early to say. That's why I say that there's no front runner right now. It's just you hear these discussions, and again, if there's 5 or 6 people on the list, you got to put Ben Carson on there.
All right. Interesting. Thank you for watching, and make sure you go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.